Welcome to Calvin Forum. I'm Randall Jelks. Today we have the honor of hearing from one of the pillars of the civil rights movement. From 1963 to 1966, John Lewis served as chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, known as SNCC. An active participant in the Freedom Rides, the Mississippi Freedom Summer, and also Bloody Sunday, he also presented a controversial speech at the March on Washington, along with Martin Luther King Jr. and others. John Lewis now serves as U.S. Representative from the 5th District of Georgia. My colleague, Dr. Garth Pauley, and I will be learning how Lewis sees the civil rights movement today as compared with the turbulent years in which he began his activism.
Campus of Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan, this is Calvin Forum, exploring Christian perspectives on religious and ethical issues of today.
We are tired. We are tired of being beaten by policemen. We're tired of seeing our people locked up in jail over and over again. And then you holler, be patient. How long can we be patient? We want our freedom, and we want it now. We do not want to go to jail, but we will go to jail if this is a price we must pay for love, brotherhood, and true peace. I appeal to all of you to get in this great revolution that is sweeping this nation. Get in and stay in the streets of every city, every village and hamlet of this nation until true freedom comes, until the revolution of 1776 is complete. We must get in this revolution and complete the revolution. Or in the Delta of Mississippi, in southwest Georgia, in the Black Belt of Alabama, in Harlem, in Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, and all over this nation, the black masses are on the march for joy and freedom.
Congressman, can you tell us about that day of the March on Washington? Can you tell us what was going through your mind and your heart and so forth on that day?
Well, August 28, 1963 was an extraordinary day. I was 23 years old. It was a day like no other day in the history of the civil rights movement. There was so much hope and so much optimism. And I remember very well when Randall, the Dean of Black Leadership, labor leader, civil rights leader, introduced me. He said, "I now present to you young John Lewis, the chair of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee." And I stood up and I looked out and I saw this sea of humanity. And I just started talking, speaking. It was a beautiful day, hot, and you saw blacks and white, men and women, young and old. It was wonderful. I think it represented one of the best days in American history.
Could you tell us a little bit about the controversy surrounding your speech on that day, given the speech that you had prepared and the concerns that some people had, and then the speech ended up being changed from what you had actually planned to give?
Well, the speech that I had originally planned to give was a speech that I felt represented the people that we were working with in the heart of the Deep South, in the Black Belt of Alabama, in Southwest Georgia, in the Delta of Mississippi. And our press secretary, a young man by the name of Julian Bond, who had the responsibility to make advanced copies of the speech available the night before, and some people saw the text of the speech and they thought it was not in keeping with the spirit of the march. But in the speech I said, in good conscience, we could not support the administration proposed civil rights bill. This was the bill that President Kennedy had proposed. I said it was too little and it was too late. And there was nothing in this bill that protected old women and young children involved in peaceful, nonviolent protests. And another part of the speech talked about we were involved in a serious revolution. The black masses are restless, and some people thought I shouldn't use such phrases, and I should delete it. And so it became very controversial. The Archbishop of Washington had threatened not to give the invocation if I didn't change the speech. And at one time, A. Philip Randall came to my rescue, and he said, "There's nothing wrong with the use of the word revolution. I use it myself sometimes. There's nothing wrong with the use of the phrase black masses. I use it myself sometimes." So we kept that part in the speech. But then there was a line near the end of the speech. I asked about what side of the government is on, where's our party? The party of Kennedy is the party of Eastland. This was a reference to Senator Eastland of Mississippi, that the party of Rockefeller Jarvis is the party of Goldwater. Where's our party? So that was okay. But then at the end, the very end of the speech, I said, "The day may come when we will not confine our marching on Washington if we do not see meaningful progress. We may be forced to march through the South the way Sherman did, non-violently." And some people thought it was inflammatory. I said, "Wait." And so Dr. King said, "John, that didn't sound like you. Can we change that?" And A. Philip Randall said, "We come so far together, let's stay together. Can we change that?" And I changed it.
How did you feel about the changes afterward? I often use the speech in a classroom when I'm teaching, and I show students both versions. And some students feel that it was definitely the right thing to do to change, and that was great to preserve the unity. And I think some students feel a kind of sense of disappointment that maybe it had been changed. What would you say maybe to someone who felt like he should have stayed with that original
Well,
message?
it was really a play on words and rhetoric. And so when I look back on it, it didn't change the meaning or the significance of the speech that much. I still made the point. In one part of the speech, I said something like, "You tell us to wait. You tell us to be patient, but we cannot wait. We cannot be patient. We want our freedom and we want it now." So I think I got the message over, and I thought it was the right thing to do, to change it for the sake of unity and for staying together.
Can I ask you a question? So many young people see you at 23 doing that. What do you say to young people today about getting involved and becoming, whatever it is, becoming active? What is your recommendation? I mean, you tell the story of writing Martin Luther King Jr. What would you say a young person say, "Representative Lewis, I'd like to be active. How do I get involved?"
I would say simply to young people and to students, study the civil rights movement, watch the video, read the books, read all of the literature, study the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. And when you see something that you think is not right, when you see people in pain and hurting and suffering, speak up, speak out. Be willing to organize. See, we use the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence in a social movement, but you can use it in how you deal with your schoolmates or your classmates, or the administrator at the college or university, or your teacher, or your family, with your sisters and brothers and your mother and father. Because being nonviolent is not just not striking back, hitting back, it's also body language, attitude. Words can be very violent. They can be very destructive, really. So young people and people not so young should be engaged, not stand on the sideline when they see something that is not fair, that is not right, and it's not just.
Can I ask you one more question following through? How did you have, now it's been some 20-some years, how do you see, or well, no, more than that now, 30-some years, how do you see the movement's its change? We can't go back to, 1965 or 1963. What is there left to be done, and what's the changes that you've seen over time?
Well, during the past 35 or 40 years, I think we've witnessed tremendous changes. I hear some young people saying from time to time, nothing has changed. Saying nothing has changed, everything is still the same. And I feel like saying, come and walk in my shoes. And I'll show you, we live in a different world. During the height of the movement, there was a tremendous amount of fear. People just afraid to even meet or to be seen with some of us. That fear is gone. The visible signs are gone. And I think the legal barriers of segregation have been torn down, they've been destroyed. But you still have problems. And they're not just problems of race, but problems of class. And it's not just affecting African American, but all citizens. They're low-income whites, they're Hispanics, they're Native American, they're Asian American, that need help. And we need to find a way to make it possible for all of our people to enjoy the fruits of this great land we call America.
Given that there are so many things that still need to be worked on, I mean, one thing that a lot of young people always seem to admire about people from the movement is that that young people were able to maintain their commitment to the movement and be persistent and keep fighting for justice even when there were a lot of setbacks. And some people in the movement seemed unable to do that. Some people did kind of drop out of the movement. What kept you going, and what kept the other people who you knew well going during those difficult times?
During those early years, I really believe this, especially in a city like Nashville, Tennessee. Many of us came under the influence of a young man, young student type. He was a young minister. He had been part of the Methodist student movement. He had traveled to India, studied Gandhi, and this young man became imbued with the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. His name was Jim Lawson. He studied at the Divinity School at Vanderbilt. And Dr. King used to say this young man had a deeper understanding of the philosophy of nonviolence than anyone he knew. And I think because of his teaching, many of us, at least a cadre of us, accepted nonviolence as a way of life, as a way of living. And we learned to pace ourselves. We knew in order to bring about what we call the beloved community, that it would take more than a week, a month, a year, a semester, a lifetime to create this sense of an interracial democracy. And you sort of said to yourself, I'm not going to hate. I'm not going to become impatient. I'm not going to become bitter. I'm not going to get lost in a sea of despair. I'm going to keep the faith. I'm going to keep my eyes on the prize. And I think that's what we tried to do.
Did you ever feel split sometimes, given that you would have to maintain that sense among yourselves, but then when you go out to speak publicly, you would really want to give a sense that things need to change now and there has to be an urgency? And so you're saying one thing publicly, which is very important, it seems to me, but in your heart knowing that you have to look at the long term.
Well, I think deep down within, many of us felt and truly believed that the struggle was a struggle of a lifetime. I think we wanted to see places desegregate, lunch counters and restaurants. We wanted to see people get the right to vote. But we knew if we were going to bring about fundamental or radical changes, lasting changes, that were going to be much more time and effort would be required.
If that was the case, well, some people lost their patience in the movement because you saw so much violence. How would you tell young people today? It seems to me that question is a kind of spiritual one. How do you imbue that kind of spiritual quality into young people today who might be considering being engaged and involved in public life?
I think it's important for young people and for people not so young to have a well-grounded foundation. You know, we just didn't go out one day and start sitting in.
Right.
One day we didn't just go and say, we're going on a freedom ride. We're going to march across the bridge in Selma, planning. We attended nonviolent workshops. We studied, we prepared. We engaged in role playing. Well, blacks played the role of whites and whites played the role of blacks. And then sometimes we had an interracial team. We would sit down at a so-called lunch counter maybe in a restaurant, and people would go through the whole idea of someone attacking you, or someone spitting on you, or someone calling you names, pulling you off the lunch counter to prepare you, to discipline you for it. And I think we came out better.
Sure. We're going to take a short break now. Our guest is Congressman John Lewis. Interviewing with me is Garth Pauley of the Calvin College Communication Arts and Sciences Department.
I am Calvin College. Through my learning, I seek to be an agent of renewal in the academy, church, and society. I aim to develop
knowledge, understanding, and critical inquiry, encouraging insightful and creative participation
in society, and fostering thoughtful, passionate Christian commitments.
I strive to embrace the best insights of Christian life and reflection, engaging issues in the intellectual
and public spheres, and enriching faith by the heritage of the past and discoveries of today.
I undertake my tasks in response to a divine call.
I challenge myself to excellence as I acquire knowledge, cultivate aspirations,
and practice a life of service. In all I say and do, wherever I may be, I hope to follow
and further the ways of God on earth. I am Calvin College.
Welcome back to Calvin Forum. I'm Randall Jelks, and my colleague is Garth Pauley of the Communication Department. We're interviewing Representative John Lewis of Georgia, a man who has spent most of his life as an active worker in the civil rights movement. Congressman Lewis, what is it like to be on the side of government now?
Well, I tell you, it is different. It's not necessarily marching, sitting in, or going on a freedom ride. But I tell you, it's sometime we were debating a piece of legislation, but I'm speaking on the floor, maybe meeting with some of my colleagues or going down to the White House to talk to the president about something. Sometimes I feel like I passed this way. I really do sometimes feel like I passed this way once before. Because I remember in 1963, the morning of the March on Washington, a group of us went up on Capitol Hill. We met with the leaders of the House and the leaders of the Senate on both sides of the aisle. And then after the March on Washington, when we had concluded all of the speeches, we went down to the White House and had a meeting with President Kennedy. So sometimes I feel like I'm reliving my life. But it's a different world. The civil rights movement taught me to take the long, hard look. And knowing that somehow, in some way, things will work out. So in the Congress, it's a great feeling from time to time, because you're not just in Washington legislating or speaking on the floor, but you go back to your district and you hear people say, thank you for helping me get such and such a thing. It's a good feeling. I enjoy it.
Now that we're away from the civil rights movement historically, and that you're in Congress now, and, I mean, we've talked a lot about some of the work that remains to be done, what kinds of unfinished business is there. But I mean, it's easy to kind of focus too much on the negative, be kind of like a muckraker. But what kinds of things excite you now about the real possibilities for change at this moment?
Well, more than anything else, I see us moving and evolving to a much higher level in this country. Right now, you hear more and more people coming to believe that there is a greater role for the federal government to play in education. That more and more members of Congress, and not just the American people, saying that we believe that health care is a right, that's not a privilege, and that health care shouldn't be determined by the quality of health care, rather, shouldn't be determined by the quality of the size of a person's wallet or by the zip code. So that's good. At least we're raising the question. People are discussing and debating the issues. And I think one day, it may take a few years, maybe a few elections, I don't know. But I think one day we're going to have comprehensive health care for all of our citizens. And we're going to do something about saving and protecting and cleaning up the environment.
You know, I want to explain a phrase you use often. Would you explain, what do you mean by the beloved community? I think that's an important phrase. Dr. King used it, you use it. Will you explain what that means today?
The idea, the concept of the beloved community is an all-inclusive community, a sense of family, a sense of one house, a sense of a not just a place, but maybe even a state of mind that is at peace with itself. Where we lay down the burden of race, where we lay down the burden of hate, and the burden of division and conflict. And we see people as human beings. And you move toward a sense that we all belong to the human family. That if you're striving for the beloved community, that can't be hate, that cannot be a division, that cannot be struggle in the sense of violence, that you recognize the dignity and the worth of all humankind. That is the idea. The beloved community is a goal that we forever strive to make real, to realize.
I'm wondering what kinds of things do you want to do personally to keep moving toward that community? I'm sure it must be fun to talk about the past for you, but maybe sometimes you feel maybe people are counting you out a little bit, and you really obviously have a lot to contribute. What do you personally want to do?
I really want to spend more time talking about creating an America that is at peace. That we don't have to have all of the violence that we have in our society. See, I really believe this. I don't think people born being violent or being hateful, putting someone down because of their race, their color, the size, or whatever, or their gender, or their sex, or whatever. I think we got to find a way, and I want to be part of a way to help people to move toward that point of loving. I just happen to believe that love is a better way. It's a more excellent way. People ask me from time to time, why you don't hate? Don't you hate the people who beat you, that arrested you, that jailed you 40 times, that almost killed you, that left you bloody, left you unconscious, gave you a concussion? And I said, no, because hate is too heavy a burden to bear. And we have to preach reconciliation. We have to bound up the wounds and move on. And if we can create these little pockets of what I call the beloved community here in America, maybe it'll spread all over our country and maybe around the world.
What do you think about, I mean, you speak of nonviolence as a way of life, and certainly we've faced this in the United States with several incidents of Columbine. We can list Pearl, Mississippi. We can go shootings in our inner city streets. How do we talk to young people about this beloved community and nonviolence as a way of life?
I think we need to start teaching the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence in our schools, in daycare centers, Head Start program, but start teaching in the kindergarten level, elementary school, middle school, high school, college, even at the government level. I think we should have a Department of Peace, a Department of Nonviolence. We have one of Defense. Let's teach people the way of nonviolence, the way of love. Let's imbue our people with this idea of love. The human personality, I really truly believe that in every human being there's something very sacred and something very special. And we don't have a right to destroy or to abuse it. So we have to imbue our children and our young people with this idea of love, with this idea of nonviolence. And teaching them that being nonviolent is not just not striking back, but it's mindset, it's attitude. Body language can be very strong and very powerful.
I wonder if you might follow up on your last comment, that obviously one of the things that really informed Dr. King's idea of the beloved community and his philosophy of nonviolence were his religious convictions. And it seems to me, at least, a lot of your vigor and excitement and continued energy springs from your convictions as well. And I wonder if you might talk about that a little bit.
Well, my involvement in the civil rights movement and my involvement in politics is an extension of my religious conviction, my faith. You know, if it hadn't been for my faith, my beliefs in the teaching of the great teacher, I don't think I would be here. I think I would have probably something else would have happened to me. Maybe I would have got lost in a sea of despair. But my faith tell me not to give up, not to give up on humankind, not to give up on the society, that I must be willing to present my body, put it on the line, be willing to accept the blows and the rest, the jailing, and go on. I think what we've tried to do over the years, and what I've tried to do, is very much in keeping with the teaching of the great teacher.
Can you tell me how you keep your faith from a lay perspective, the contentiousness of the congressional debates? It seems that they've even gotten more contentious in the last 8 years. How do you keep your balance and perspective when all of this hullabaloo is going on around you?
Well, as members of Congress, we argue a great deal. Mm-hmm. We fuss. We engage in partisan battles from time to time, in committees, on the House floor. But in reality, the Congress is like a big family. Mm-hmm. It's like a big family with family problems. Some of the same men and women that you see arguing in committees on the floor of the House, they're the best of friends. They leave the floor of the House, they go down into the dining room, they eat together, they go to the gym, they play a game of basketball together, they travel together, they visit. And some of the members, they're roommates. They're living in the same apartment, in the same house. They travel together. But they're trying to make a point, and from time to time they're trying to score a partisan victory. Mm-hmm. But the great majority of the members of the House, both Democrats and Republicans, they're very decent men and women. Mm-hmm. They're trying to do the very best from where they see their roles.
I know a lot of your colleagues often express their deep admiration and respect for you. And I wonder if you might just say, who are the kinds of people that you have a lot of respect for?
Well, there's several members of Congress that I got to know and over the years, and there are members that are there now, and there's some that are no longer there. There was one or two members I often said about these two, that maybe if they had been born in another period, in another time, they probably would have been prime minister, maybe president, king, or something else. There was one man who was chair of the preparation committee for many years from Kentucky. He was a prince of a man. He was a gentleman.
I have to interrupt. I'm sorry. Well, it looks like our time is up, and I've been speaking with U.S. Representative John Lewis and Garth Pauley of Calvin College. Thank you for joining us on Calvin Forum.